And Miles, will you go through the consent agenda?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. Tonight on the consent, you have 11 items. Before I get to item B11, I'm going to ask that item be removed and placed at a future council meeting, so just a heads up on that. Item B1 is the approval of the November 18th meeting minutes. Item B2 is to consider approval of an ordinance to close a portion of Glenway Street for the annual Christmas Village. This is on closure of Glenway Street on Saturday, December 7th for train rides as part of that annual event. They'd also like to hold Sunday, December the 8th as an alternative date in case of inclement weather. Item B3 is consideration and approval of amended ordinance authorizing the closing of streets and the sale, possession, and consumption of alcoholic beverages during the 2024 Bavarian Holiday Fest. This is a revised ordinance that allows for the rain date to be added and adds Glenway Street to that event footprint. Item B4 is consideration and approval of an ordinance to close a portion of Glenway Street for horse carriage rides. This is for Friday, December 20th, and Saturday, December 21st. The closure only apply for the carriage loading and unloading zones. Agenda item B5 is consideration and approval of the Chronicle mural design. The DVDA board and Amanda Hoffler, they have requested the approval of this, and the DVDA board has looked at this as well. Just as you recall, this mural agreement was approved on December the 4th, 2023, and Chronicle Holdings LLC is providing the funding for that mural. Item B6 is the Belmont Housing Authority and their waiver of the payment in lieu of taxes request. Erica Bobo, the Belmont Housing Authority Executive Director, sent you all a memo, an update for December 2024, and the waiver of the pilot is requesting a waiver of that payment in lieu of taxes for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024, in the amount of $17,572. Item B7 is budget amendment number 5 from the Finance Department, which will pay for approximately half of the Reed Park signage project. Item number B8 is budget amendment 6. This proposed budget amendment reflects the remaining balance on the consultant contracts associated with the comprehensive land use plan, the multimodal transportation network plan, and the lucid sewer capacity model into fiscal year 24-25. These items were not complete last fiscal year, therefore the amount is carried over to this fiscal year. So it's a budget amendment appropriating funding for this fiscal year to complete those projects. Item B9 is a proposed budget amendment that recognizes revenue of the remaining $1,652,411 of ARPA funds and reallocates the funding from salaries expense to future capital. This was also a budget amendment that was included earlier this year as budget amendment number 1. So this just is reappropriating money into capital items, future capital. Item B10 is budget amendment number 8 for the wayfinding signage project. The proposed budget amendment is for $19,753 from general fund, and this is to complete the wayfinding sign update project. Initially, inside this contract, city staff was to go out, remove the actual wayfinding signs, take them to the contractor. The contractor was to reface them and then give them back to Public Works to install. It's very time consuming for our staff, and so we asked that the contractor provide a turnkey quote to actually take them down, reface them, and then put them up. And so this is the amount that's needed to do that over our PO amount. So we're recommending that budget amendment be approved. And then item B11 is the consideration and approval of updated personnel policy, and I'm asking that that be removed from consent at this time. Turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Miles. Any questions about any items on the consent agenda? Just with respect to the budget amendment with the ARPA funds, just so it's, I want to be clear, because we had previously approved a budget amendment assigning the ARPA funds to the respective funds, stormwater, water and sewer, and general, to pay for the salaries, and we discussed that. And then this is just a further clarification that basically taking the money we saved that we had already budgeted prior to the ARPA distribution and putting it in future capital for later projects. Or
right. Well, our finance director, Jared Biles, consulted with the League of Municipalities and our auditor, and they said instead of supplementing the salary line item, to supplement future capital, it would make it easier for future audits if we did that. And so given that we're using that amount initially in budget item number 1 to go towards salaries, we're now taking that money and allocating it towards future capital, if that makes sense.
like future capital projects. Or
Correct. So we're not asking for 1.6 million more in this fiscal year. We're still going to do the capital projects and the amount that was budgeted, and then the extra will go into unassigned fund balance at the end of the year.
any other questions? All right, that being the case, we will move right into our regular meeting, and I will call the December 2nd, 2024 meeting of Belmont City Council to order. And I would ask that we all please rise and for Jason to give the invocation.
Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together for this important meeting to conduct business on behalf of the city and our citizens. We ask for your guidance as we consider the matters before us tonight. And thank you for the staff and others who spent time preparing the presentations that we will hear. We also pray for your guidance and protection over the coming days and weeks as we gather for various Christmas activities in our community. Most of all, during this time, we pray that you help us remember the reason for this season. We ask all of this in your heavenly name. Amen.
And Alex will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So before we head into the meat of the agenda, we have some recognitions and acknowledgments. And first, we have a recognition of 2 outgoing members of the Main Street Advisory Board and Downtown Belmont Development Association boards. And for those recognitions, I will turn it over to Cassidy Lackey, our Downtown Director.
Good evening, everyone. As Jim mentioned, I wanted to just publicly recognize 2 of our board members who are sadly leaving us, Jennifer Church and Joe Jordan. Would you guys mind joining me up here? Yeah. You guys are going to love this. Got some headshots for you.
younger.
That's what I work with. As many of you know, but some of you may not, Jennifer Church has been our board chair the last 3 years, and Joe has served as our vice chair, and both of them have been such integral parts to both the board and the downtown community. They have given so much of themselves to the city and our businesses and all of the community members, and we've said thank you a million times, but I wanted to make sure that we thanked you publicly and provided you a small token of our appreciation for your service to the board and me as well. So I just wanted to say thank you to you both, and we're going to miss you, but they're not going far. They're still on our committees, but yes. So thank you both. Thank you.
both Jennifer and Joe as one of the council liaisons to the Main Street Board. I know how much they've done for the city and how much work they've put into the board and in downtown, so thank you again. Next, we have the fire department pinning ceremony, and for that, I will turn it over to our fire chief, Todd Davis.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for allowing us to come before you with some awards and recognitions, more recognitions than awards. These group of gentlemen that are coming before you, we have 2 promotions, and then the other ones are swearing into our agency. However, we're going to do all that at one time. But quickly to talk about our recruitment issues in the fire service, as you've heard me discuss before, recruitment is way down. So we've had to change the way we do business in order to get qualified people in here to do the job. And that's what we have done. This is the new generation of the Belmont Fire Department. And I am proud of these new firefighters that are coming forward. I will start by introducing to you Caleb Muse. Caleb is going to be pinned by his father, Robbie Muse. Caleb is currently an engineer, and he's been promoted to the rank of captain, and he will be assigned to Engine 44A after tonight. Engineer Dallas Allison will be pinned by his wife, Courtney. Dallas will be moving to engineer on Engine 44B. Engineer Tristan Hopkins is assigned to Engine 44C, and he will be pinned by Senior Fire Investigator David Williams from the Charlotte Fire Department. Our next one is firefighter Anthony Dressler. He will be pinned tonight by his wife, Brooke Dressler. Anthony Dressler was his class president and was also a squad leader in his class. So we received number 1 out of that class, and that's good news. Our next is firefighter Austin Mitchell. He will be pinned by his father, Jamie Wilkinson. Firefighter Mitchell was also a class president, and he also earned the physical fitness award in his class. So not only that, we have an athletic firefighter. Our next one will be firefighter Michael Gukowski. Firefighter Gukowski will be pinned by his cousin Lee Kish. Firefighter Gukowski was also a squad leader, and he was a valedictorian of his EMT class. Again, we're back to number 1. And then we have firefighter Trace Hefner, who will be pinned by his grandfather, Dennis Hefner. You're pinning, you can step up. I ask you place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. I'm going to state your name. I,
Michael Bukowski.
do hereby declare that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of North Carolina, and the members I serve with. And as a firefighter of the Belmont Fire Department, my fundamental duty is to serve the people I swear to protect, to safeguard and preserve life, health, and property against fire and other perils. As a firefighter, I will uphold the standards of my profession and position. I will share my knowledge and skills with my colleagues and the firefighters I am assigned to lead. I will never allow my personal feelings nor danger to self deter me from my responsibilities as a leader and as a firefighter. I will lead my fire company to the best of my ability and with fairness and with no prejudice. I will at all times respect the property and the rights of all men and women, the laws of my country, and the members I serve with. I recognize the badge of my office as a symbol of the fire department and public faith and trust, and I accept so long as I am true to the ethics of the fire service. I will constantly strive to achieve the objectives and ideals that the fire service instills, dedicating myself to the saving of life, preventing and suppressing fires, and performing other duties enacted and placed upon to me. As a member of the Belmont Fire Department, I accept this self-imposed and self-enforced obligation as my responsibility and make these promises so solemnly, freely, and upon my honor, in testimony thereof on this date, the 2nd day of December of the year 2024 in the city of Belmont, North Carolina. Congratulations. Don't panic, I always say.
Well, if I could share with you.
All right, congratulations once again to everyone. And we'll now move on with the remainder of the meeting. At this time, I will entertain a motion to set the agenda. Motion made by Jason, seconded by Alex. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We have set the agenda. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the removal of item B11, personnel policy.
Motion to set the consent agenda for removal of item B11.
All right, motion made by Alex, seconded by Jason. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda is approved with the exception of B11. Next, we have public comment. I don't think we do have our, we do, look at that. We have our slide for public comment procedures. All speakers have up to 3 minutes on any topic. Please state your name and address when you begin. Please be respectful of city council staff and the public. Generally speaking, this is a time to bring matters to our attention. This is not a time to engage in discussion or debate. However, if warranted, we may ask city staff to follow up with the speaker or with the issues raised by the speaker to address those concerns. And so again, this is general public comment. We do have a couple of other public hearings, and so those were signed up separately. We also, when you get up here, you'll see we have some nice lights, like traffic lights, and it works sort of under the same principle of green, yellow, and red. So off we go. Our first speaker is Danielle Van Heerden.
All right, hey, City Council, you guys all know why I'm here, to repeat the same thing I've repeated for 5 years and counting. So, when I ask people to come and talk about this topic, because it's greatly affecting our community, I can't tell you the number of people who have said to me, oh, we left Belmont Parks and Recs a long time ago. They're terribly managed, they don't listen, and they're horribly run. I can't disagree with any of those comments, but I can say I care. So that's why I'm here talking to you guys once again. We have a population of 15,669 according to our 2024 census. So, what does that mean? Around 17% are under the age of 15. That means we have around 3,000 kids here under the age of 15. 2024 U10 for girls basketball. You guys know I'm here for the girls basketball age divisions. It's still 3 years. This is 5 years and counting. 3-year age divisions for the girls. The boys have 2-year age divisions. They have always had 2-year age divisions. The girls have had 3-year age divisions. I've been fighting this for 5 years. I have heard everything from, we don't have space, we don't have the girls. Let me tell you the stats for this year. We have 8 teams for U10. They each have 10 players each. That's 80 girls. Core Church, all of the girls that are my daughter's age division, she's 10 and 11, have moved to Core Church because we don't facilitate their needs. They have 2-year age divisions at Core Church. Why can a church do it and a city cannot do it? Core Church has 4 girls teams. They each have 7 girls on each team. They have an entire league. So, people can't use the rec center. I pay for this rec center that I do not use because your hours are abysmal. They don't facilitate anybody with a working schedule, and they're closed on Sundays. We just joined Chris Lane's gym, open all the time, great facility, we love it. But I'm paying taxes to use that. So my middle schooler, or my middle child, played on these age divisions. She was a 1st grader playing on the same team as 4th graders. I don't know if your kids are so far removed, you guys don't realize how big that is. It's huge. 1st graders playing with 4th graders because of your 3-year age divisions. She will not touch a basketball. I am not being dramatic. I am not exaggerating. She hates basketball because of the experience she had here. So, Rook just signed up. She's 7 years old. She wanted to, we were like, you know what, we're going to do it again. She loves basketball. We're going to take her. We went and practiced with some friends. We're playing in the same age division as her. It was terrible. She was frustrated, she was upset, and she was sad. And we sat down and had a conversation. My husband was signed up to coach and everything. And he said, this will turn out just like Ren did. She won't touch a basketball if we follow through with this. So guess what we had to do? We had to pull her from the program. So here we are. Once again, you guys lost a coach, somebody willing to pour into other girls, and you guys...
I think is that 3 minutes? It's 3 minutes. Red light.
Okay, so 2-year age divisions, guys, they deserve it.
Thank you. Next up is CJ Vandever.
Hello, City Council. My first time speaking, great thing to come speak about. I am the owner and operator of Catawba River Antique Mall. It has been in this community for 11 years now. Loved it here. When we came to Belmont, we knew this is where we wanted to be. We were told that Belmont was up and coming, that it was growing, it was going to boom. It has done that. We have been there operating as a retail space since 2013. We just went into our 11th year. On our 10th year, we, I don't know what this is, but we had an event venue in there. It was known about, it was used by the public, it was used by Belmont for things. We did community things, we offered it up for guardian ad litem programs, we offered it up for lease of these. We did not charge them because we feel like that's a part of what we're supposed to do, is being a part of the community. We love this community. We are in a situation, we were kind of shut down in January because of a change of use issue. I lost my husband 3 years ago, and a lot of things we just kind of did as a business, not really thinking about, hey, you might need to discuss that with somebody. But we had been doing it, so it wasn't like we did it trying to be backhanded about it, but we're in a situation now, we need help. I have put in for a text amendment change of use, because the current language in the commercial zone that we're in does not allow for an event venue. That's really sad to me, because if we wanted to open up as a nightclub, I could do that tomorrow. I want to have family weddings, I want to have birthday parties, I want to have anniversary parties, I want to continue to do those things in this community the way that we have. But this has been since January. I have lost an amazing amount of revenue. Now, my revenue doesn't come from, the way that you think it is. It's not through the sales. My revenue comes from renting that space. I rent space to vendors and I rent space to have an event. So I've been shut down since January. Back up a little bit, we were closed a little while because of COVID, so that affected us a great deal too. And then my husband got sick, so I took some time off to take care of him, which I do not regret and would do 1,000,000 times over, even if I lost everything tomorrow. But I say all of this, I didn't see a red light. We just,
Is that?
yeah, we just need some help, guys. Pushing the text amendment through. I'm not asking to circumvent, I'm just asking to expedite. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Next, we have Cassie Nguku.
Good job. I'm just gonna take a minute. My name's Cassie Nguku. I'm here to support Danny. I just think that the girls should be offered the same thing as the boys. Like, don't scare them away from sports by having a 3-year age gap. So, that's all.
Thank you.
Can I use the rest of her time?
Well, do you need, do you
I
need
do.
it?
I have one more thing to say, just one more point. Okay, I just want to say, I've been fighting you guys on this for literally years and years and years. I'm going to tell you about a formative experience that I had as a young engineer. I worked for a very successful company, thousands of employees. It was run by the Coors family. It was a high-tech ceramics company. And my boss came into me, or I was tasked with bringing 6-inch diameter pucks up to 12-inch diameter for transparent armor. It's literally rocket science. And I went, I did my thing, I couldn't do it. I went to the VP of sales, I said, yep, I can't do this. And he said, he's a great businessman, and he said, yeah, I don't want to hear your excuses. I'm done hearing your excuses. I want you to go back and do what we pay you to do. And so I was livid. How dare he? He doesn't know science. He didn't know what I was doing. But I went back and I did it. And I did it. I literally did it because he pushed me. And so we need great leaders to lead this city. This isn't about the excuses that we're getting from Parks and Recs. You guys shouldn't be facilitating that. We should be a great city because you guys aren't here to hear excuses. You're here to say what is good for our community and figure it out and make it happen. Whether that looks like 3 verse 3 in the beginning or whatever it needs to grow into. We don't do any marketing. We don't facilitate any of the girls' needs. So I am done hearing excuses. I want our great leadership to lead us to where we're supposed to be. And if they can't make it happen, hire people who can. So please help change this, because I know not one of you guys woke up this morning saying, hey, today I'm gonna make Belmont really average. So please change this for our girls. They deserve 2-year age divisions just like the boys. Make it a priority, make it a directive, not an option. Oh, when we have enough girls. We have enough girls. So please, that's it.
Thank you. Next we have Nancy Siegel.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I am Nancy Siegel. I live in Eagle Park, Belmont. I've been a resident here for 8 years. When I told Danny that I would participate in this, I decided to see what your Parks and Recreation mission statement was, because I have a granddaughter who doesn't live in this area, but I'm very familiar with a number of the young girls in our neighborhood. So what struck me was the opening statement, which is enhancing the quality of life with healthy recreation opportunities. I support a 2-year age split in girls basketball, same as the boys. It's now more than ever an opportunity to participate in the interest of girls basketball based on everything that's happened at the college level. Girls are clamoring to be the next Caitlin Clark. So I encourage all of you to build a program that is right for girls and is likely to inspire more families with girls to join and not to turn them away because of these age split differences. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, and I'm Zanita.
Oh, yeah. That was actually perfectly correct. Zanita Carver. How are y'all doing today?
I'm good. I went to law school with Zanita.
Did you really spell the same way?
Yes.
No way.
Yes.
Nice. Welcome. Hello. Thank y'all for allowing me to speak a little bit. I'm a really good friend of Danielle. We all live in Eagle Park. My family of 4. I have an 11-year-old, and I also have an 11-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter. And we participated in Belmont Parks and Rec since we got here 8 years ago. Give or take some. When she told me about this several years ago, I was really kind of shocked that it has taken this long just to get basic equality for our children. It's hard when I have to explain to our son why, while our first grader is playing against a 4th grader, and he was in the 4th grade. That just didn't make sense from the development standpoint, confidence. So it's hard from a parent's perspective, my husband and myself, to try to explain that at that particular young age that life isn't really fair. And so it was just disappointing because I really like the community that we live in. I talked a little bit about that. They deserve those 2-year 8 divisions. I mean, I know my husband, of course, would definitely step up as well and be a coach because he gets really involved in the sports with soccer. And I know that Danny's husband would do it as well. So we really do have the coaches, and now we have a beautiful facility. I don't want to use my last minute and 30 seconds to talk about the time. That's kind of obvious to you guys too, for sure. We would love to utilize that. But that, again, is not my point for today. Today is just the 2-year age difference. Let's just make it equal for everybody. I mean, help us out as parents that are okay with shuttling our kids to all these practices. But it's disheartening when, our daughter really wants to do something that a 4th grader can't, and then she doesn't get playtime and things like that. So let's just kind of reflect on that. If you all do have children, just help us out, and let's get them all started at least on an equal playing field until they get out in the real world, and then they have to kind of prepare a little bit differently. Thank you.
Last speaker, Hanukkah Elements. Okay.
I'm here in support of my husband and I have we have 3 grandchildren. We live in Belmont. 2 of them are girls, 1 of them is a boy. The girls right now are playing in a different league because they are not able to play in the Belmont League because of the age difference. So I'm here in support. I'm hoping that everybody listens to what Danny had to say and the other people had to say. It would only make sense that there are the same rules for the girls as there are for the boys, especially in this day and age. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, that is everyone we have signed up for general public comment. Thank you to everyone who spoke. All right, very good. So, moving. Did anyone have any?
I would just like to reiterate on the building the staff some of the issues and requests were made by the common and people and just Neil and we've had some normal discussions to try to make sure we can work with these folks because it's definitely an asset to our community, and the impact that you all have here is felt, and it's something that we want to make sure that we are protective of and working with you all. So we'll be working forward with that.
Yeah. I also echo what Jason says. I've actually been to a few events there at that facility, so again, I'd be willing to look at that. And I think we talked about this, with the text amendments, there's a couple tonight to talk about. It's an ever-evolving type of thing, right? We try to get it right, but I think this warrants some additional attention.
And the planning department has informed me that, this item is gonna be on the December, planning and zoning board agenda.
Which is next week.
Next week's my thing.
Gosh, thank you, Tiffany.
I'm sorry, what was that day?
The 16th.
No.
The 11th.
Rescheduled for December, so it'll be December 11th.
Okay, thank you. That's
December
great.
11th, yes. All right, very good. Anything further on anything?
Just,
I think
no, go ahead, Kathy.
I was just gonna say, I think it would be prudent to speak on the 2-year age gap for the girls in our meeting at Parks and Rec. I'm not sure what type of, how we go through with this, what kind of approval we have to say a 2 from a 3 or a 3 to a 2. I don't know if it's just a voice it to zip kind of thing, or if this is something we have to bring to us and vote on. I'm not being.
I think that probably the Parks and Rec Director Zip could provide some information that we all know the full, the statistics on what the program is looking like right now and what it has in the past to see if if it would warrant a change next year.
Okay, fantastic. I think we could visit that for sure, though.
Alex, did you?
No, I was just gonna say probably the same thing. I think it's still probably prudent to bring up to the Parks and Rec board and have them discuss it as well.
Because they probably want to, even if we directed, they probably want to be, that's sort of the first point of contact.
And I do want to make it known that there is public comment at our Parks and Rec board meeting. So if you have something that you want to speak on in front of the actual board, that would be ideal to bring it straight to them and get it in their ears immediately. But I have to say, having a 7-year-old little girl, I couldn't imagine her playing with a 4th grader. She'd probably double down and not want to do it. So I definitely think we need to get a hold of this and take care of it.
I would say too, notwithstanding some of the rhetoric, it's not the first occasion, either public or private conversations, but I do think that, and I know that staff has been looking into this, and that there are reasons the way things are.
Of course,
There are
right.
reasons that things are the way they are, but if there's further evaluation that would, help us to get to
Definitely.
a better solution.
And it depends on volunteers as well. I mean, if people are willing to.
Just one question. Do we have a joint workshop coming up with the Parks and Rec board?
I'm not aware, but
Well, that's more, I'm talking about the advisory board.
yeah, I'm not sure what our upcoming, I know what one of our workshops will be devoted to, but beyond December, I'm not sure.
Okay, I was just curious if I had an opportunity with you.
All right.
That's something to consider though.
Yeah.
January, to do a joint.
That was a good idea.
All right, thank you, everyone. Next item we have is C2, public hearing on annexation 2024-01 Lakeview Farms, petition requesting non-contiguous annexation. This was previously on our June 2024 calendar or agenda for public hearing. At that time, it was continued until today, and now we are going to continue it just a little bit further. And so I'll ask Tiffany Farrow, our planning director, to further explain.
Thank you, City Council. Again, this is for the public hearing for the annexation for Lakeview Farms. And as Mayor Pro Tem just summarized, this was previously continued to tonight's meeting. The initial background was that the public hearing on the annexation was opened originally on May 6th, 2024. It was then continued to June 3rd in order to align with the public hearing that was anticipated for a conditional zoning application on the same subject parcel. At the June 3rd meeting, it was continued to tonight's meeting by City Council. And then at your November workshop meeting, we heard interest to check with the applicant on whether or not there was a possibility and availability at the December 16th meeting to continue this item for scheduling purposes, since tonight's meeting did start a little bit later. The applicant is available, we have confirmed that, so it is with that staff is recommending that council continue this item to the December 16th city council workshop.
And I will state a couple of additional things. We have two individuals signed up for public comment tonight. As we will continue the hearing until the 16th, I would encourage Mr. Scheitler and Mr. Milton to attend that meeting and express their public comments. Again, this was due to scheduling and the lateness of this meeting that since this will likely take a fair amount of time to deal with, and we had other items on the agenda tonight, we wanted to have sort of a standalone meeting where this would be the sole focus. And what time, is that gonna start at 5? 5 o'clock on the 16th. So please, both of you attend that meeting and express your public comments at that time. We had previously opened the public hearing, so all we need now is a motion to continue this item until our December 16th council workshop.
I'll make a motion to continue do I need to read out the full title with the numerical reference or not?
I think if you just, Parks, no.
Okay.
You can just, item C2.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we continue item C2, Lakeview Farms annexation, to our work session on December 16th.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Jason, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we will address the Lakeview Farms annexation on December 16th. Item C3, public hearing for ZA 2024-01 Lakeview Farms, a request to establish a conditional zoning district to allow for 385 home sites, single-family residential and townhomes on 223 acres. And this, the C2 is the annexation. This is actually the zoning, but it's going to be the same procedure.
That is correct. As a reminder, this public hearing was initially opened on June 3rd, 2024, and continued to December 2nd, 2024 by City Council at that meeting. We are now at December 2nd, and there is a request to continue this public hearing to the December 16th meeting, similarly as the annexation public hearing, so that both can be held on the same evening and allow for plenty of time for discussion.
All right, same thing, we have Mr. Milton and Mr. Scheitler both signed up for this item as well. Same deal, please come on the 16th and share your comments during public comment during the hearing. We've already opened the public hearing, so again, a motion to continue till December 16th would be appropriate.
I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing to December 16th.
Motion made by Alex.
Second.
Seconded by Jason. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. We shall hear from Lakeview Farms and all concerned members of the public on December 16th. Thank you. All right. That brings us to item C4. Oh, look at that. The motion is approved. Item C4, public hearing for TA 2024-01, front and side setbacks, single-family residential. Now, this item also was continued from a prior council meeting, so we opened the public hearing last month and continued it until this month, so we do not need a motion to go into public hearing. We are already in public hearing, and I will recognize our planning director, Tiffany Farrow, to present this text amendment.
Thank you, City Council. This is the public hearing for text amendment 2024.01, relating to front and side yard setbacks. So just a little bit of history before we get started. We initially, several years ago, visited the item of setbacks, specifically side setbacks. That was back in 2020. And City Council at that time adopted text amendment 2020.05. And so some of the basic highlights of that text amendment was that it analyzed specifically the side yard setbacks for type A or alley loaded lots, as well as type B street loaded lots. So it did look at both of the ones that were available at the time in 2020. And the goal of that specific text amendment was to increase the minimum spacing between homes. It primarily targeted lots within new development. And as such, it increased the minimum side setbacks in new developments from 10 feet minimum between, or to 10-foot minimum between alley-loaded lots, or type A lots, and 12-foot minimum between street-loaded lots, or type B lots. Since that time, there has been ongoing interest, both from the public, staff, and council, to relook at our setback requirements and clarify them, both for new construction as well as on infill lots within our community. And so the primary goals of the text amendment for your consideration this evening are to clarify the differences between type B and type C detached house building forms. Type C was a new building form that was introduced following the 2020 text amendment, and that was introduced at the same time that we added some additional provisions to encourage and incentivize larger lot developments. But since then, the language has proved to be in need of some clarification, so that is one of the goals of this text amendment. Another goal is to remove the lot averaging requirement that is currently included within the Land Development Code for infill lots specifically, and create a shared standard for both infill and new development that can be focused on the relationship between what the side setback is and its lot width. So that there is still some relationship there, but that it's straightforward and easy to understand by all. There's also a goal with this text amendment to increase the total side setback requirements for residential detached home lots and allow for some flexibility on some side setback distribution as long as minimum building separation is maintained. The last main goal of this text amendment was really to clarify a minimum front setback for all lots. So there was a clear minimum front setback for new developments, although because of the lot averaging rule, there wasn't necessarily a minimum as defined in the current code that exists today. But we still wanted to make sure that some contextual influence existed, especially for homes that are within an established community that may have other development on either side of it. So, after looking at and hearing from the community on what some of that feedback is, and also hearing some of the items as discussed by City Council, in October of 2024, staff presented a proposed text amendment to Planning Board to focus on clarification of setback requirements specifically for infill lots, but with the goal of streamlining and trying to find a setback regulation that could apply whether or not a parcel was determined to be for a new development or an infill lot. In October, Planning Board discussed this item, but elected to continue the discussion to allow for the generation and consideration of an alternative to the text as proposed by staff before they rendered their recommendation. So subsequently, that draft was provided to staff for inclusion in the November agenda packet and was presented at the November Planning Board meeting. And it was also compared to the original draft that was proposed by staff to highlight the differences as well as the similarities between those two versions. And ultimately, following that discussion, Planning Board recommended the alternative text that was proposed, which is now the text that has been provided in your packet for consideration tonight. And so I apologize. I would direct you, I'm not going to review all of these items in detail, but I have it here in case we need to go back and look at anything. But I just wanted to highlight that before we put the recommendation before you this evening, we did look at a comparison between what our current Land Development Code states, as well as the version that was provided by staff in the initial draft for Planning Board, and then ultimately the version that Planning and Zoning Board is recommending. So we have this comparison chart available for your consideration and detailed use if you'd like. We can always go back to this during your question and answer, but the highlights that I really want to showcase are there's a lot of similarities here, but the main thing is, as you can see, streamlining those requirements for side setbacks. Staff's version for side setbacks was proposed as a percentage of lot width, specifically 25%. The current ordinance, as you can see, for new developments would be 20% of the lot width, so the thought was increasing that slightly to 25% of the lot width, or 14-foot overall. The current says 12 overall. But you can see right now we have some infill that requires that lot averaging, so staff's proposal was definitely to eliminate that because it's created a lot of confusion, both with individuals who are looking to develop, but as well as the neighbors who live near a vacant lot trying to understand what the side setback of future development might be near them. So we wanted something that would be as easy to understand as possible for all. Planning board's recommendation on side yard setback, one of the discussion points was that percentage, it wasn't an easy to grab number, right? It still could lead to some confusion or require some additional interpretation that might be hard if somebody just called up on the phone wanting to know that information. And so their proposal is a flat numeric side setback, and there would be one established for lots under 80 foot in width, and then another one established for lots over 80 foot in width. So both are relational to the lot width. It's just a different approach proposed by each, and it's our staff's interpretation that planning board has refined what staff was intending to target with the text amendment through their revision. With front yard, you can see both of the proposals, both of staff as well as planning board, seek to establish, regardless of infill or new development, a 20-foot minimum front setback. And then if the homes within an existing neighborhood are set back further, there should be some contextual relationship between how a new home is placed within that existing street frontage. It's just about the language of whether or not that should be a specific 15% flexibility or shall be generally consistent as determined by the planning department. And then the last main thing on this for type B lots, again, these are all lots that are under 80 foot in width, is that our current land development code notes a minimum building separation of 12 feet. Staff proposed 14 feet. And planning board noted that this minimum building separation is actually already addressed within the North Carolina building and fire codes, and so they felt that it would be more prudent to reference those codes instead of duplicating efforts, so that if those codes were ever updated to increase that number, that our codes would then therefore be updated by reference. So you can see a similar approach being taken on the lots that are over 80 foot in width. The main differences here would be that the front setback minimum is proposed at 30 feet as opposed to those under 80 foot in width, which is 20. And then the side setback similarly is clarified, and staff had originally proposed a 30% lot width, or 24 feet overall in terms of side setbacks. Planning and zoning board still kept the 24 foot overall and is proposing that to be done by 12 foot on either side. The big difference here on both of these on the side setbacks too is that the version that was drafted by staff allowed for a little bit of flexibility administratively on that side yard setback, but in discussion with the planning board, they felt like having a minimum set standard established for everyone to know what that minimum distance would be important, and there'd still be an opportunity to allow for flexibility if someone wanted to utilize the special use permit process or conditional zoning. So it doesn't eliminate that option, but it takes it out of administrative discretion and puts that into council's discretion in the event that somebody wants to propose alternative setback solutions for a specific parcel or development. Again, as you can see, her minimum building separation is referencing building code as opposed to a specific number, but largely the other things are very similar in intent. It's just about how it's written in an application. And so, again, the alternative version is the one that planning board is recommending for your consideration and approval this evening. To highlight some key differences, type B and type C lots are now proposed to be defined by their lot width rather than their definition as a cluster or conventional development. It still meets the similar intent, but just tries to clarify and streamline how the wording is written in the land development code. The proposed sets a standard side setback based on that lot width rather than utilizing a percentage to provide clear expectations for existing residents and new developers. Eliminates some administrative flexibility on the distribution of setbacks, whether they can be more allocated to the left or the right, and ensures that we have a minimum side setback on both the left and right as drafted unless it's otherwise approved through council approved process. And then lastly, it references the building and fire code for that minimum required building separation, which is inherently also reinforced by your minimum side setback to the left and the right. So just to illustrate all of that text, because I sometimes find pictures are easier to illustrate this concept.
You're a visual learner.
I am a visualer. And so I understand it takes all different forms, so some people are text, and that is what we are actually revising, but the visual of how this would be proposed is that the two lots, as presented to the left, are known as type B lots because their lot width are under 80 feet in width. So you can see there they have a 7-foot side setback on either side. Again, right now, for new development, it's a 6-foot side setback on either side, so this is an increase in total side setback of 2 feet per lot. And then a 20-foot minimum side setback. And then once you get over 80 foot in width, those side setbacks would be proposed to increase to 12 foot on each side or 24 foot overall, and have a minimum front setback of 30 feet.
It's good to see it visually, but in reality, there's no gap in between those lot lines, right?
There is no gap, but what you can tell there is if that were to be the case within a new development, now there would be a 14-foot minimum building separation.
Right.
And then as noted, type C would still have a 24-foot unless otherwise determined by council during some sort of special approval.
This is good. Are there any existing visual references you can point us to of, like, for instance, type B lots that have, say, a 14-foot setback, side setback?
So I would like to tell you that that would be something that would be easy to note. Practically, when you're looking at
So
new
like a
communities,
neighborhood or-
it's very challenging to visually see that distance, so without going out and individually measuring that, but
Like in Eagle Park, I mean, is that?
Eagle Park is smaller than all of what is currently proposed. So under the provisions as they're being presented right now, unless they were granted relief through conditional zoning, a community like Eagle Park would not be allowed to be developed under this purview. They would need to be granted relief or special provision based on the requirement for the side yard setbacks.
Because their side setbacks are less than 14.
That's correct. They're actually less than the 6 that we have today as well. They were developed prior to 2020 when the side setback requirements were less than they are today. So it doesn't mean that there wouldn't be an option, but it would mean that they would need to seek relief of that through conditional zoning if they were to come through with a similar type of development today. So this would apply as the standard for both projects that are not conditional zoning as well as those that are seeking conditional zoning. But those that are seeking conditional zoning have the opportunity to request relief if they can justify that and make sure that it still meets building code as well as final code in terms of that separation. So there are some ways that they can enhance the structure in order to have that building and distance separation lessened through the fire and building code from my understanding, but those solutions cost more, right? So it's a balance to the developer that they would need to be willing to agree to those additional construction requirements in order to reduce those setbacks. And even still, that would require council's approval in order to do that as well. So this is what's currently proposed as it's illustrated. Again, we are not proposing in this text amendment to change the rear yard setback. That is currently 30 feet. It's proposed to remain 30 feet. That's why you're not seeing this called out on the illustration.
30 feet across the board, no difference between B and C.
That's correct, on the rear yard setback. But you can see it does change the proportion of the building envelope or the area that someone would have to site their new building. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, and it just allows for different size lots to be able to have housing choices that are placed upon them. And that wider building envelope may better allow for a product like a ranch to be established on that lot, where something that it has a little bit more of a narrower building envelope might be better suited for a 2-story type of home. So by having both as options would still allow for the housing choice flexibility within our land development code. So after this item went to planning board, ultimately planning board recommended 5-1 that city council approve the text amendment as currently presented before you. And then planning board also unanimously found 6-0 that the text amendment was a reasonable request in their opinion and in the public interest, as well as that it is consistent with the goals of the comprehensive land use plan in the areas of community character and land use. So it's with that I ask city council to receive the staff report, any public comments here this evening, and ultimately make a decision on this proposed text amendment with a motion to approve as presented, approve as modified, or disapprove. And as a reminder, we are also asking that you make the 2 required findings of reasonableness and in the public's interest, as well as consistency with the goals of the comprehensive land use plan.
Thank you, Tiffany. Any questions for Tiffany?
I do. So, just so I understand, again, kind of currently for the infill lots particularly, right now we have, and I know we've mentioned in the past, this calculation of some sorts that's averaging, right? So if you have an empty lot, and let's say, you've got a multitude of different side setbacks as they exist today, we would just take the average within the certain radius of that, correct? It's this, what is the radius itself? Or no,
One block.
It's within
block.
300 feet or 1 block length, whichever of those is less.
So I guess I understand the intent behind that, which would be my concern in changing it, is if you have these already established neighborhoods, take Glenmere, for example, or like off of Julia Avenue where this has come up before, you kind of want to keep with what is currently in the neighborhood already as opposed to, building, out of the norm or something. So I guess that's where I get hung up on changing the averaging.
So one of the things that we found practically is, one, there is a lack of clarity on everyone's end on how that's interpreted. For instance, what's less? The length of the block, 300 feet? Or is it that the side setbacks and the average of those is less? And if the side setback is less, but the front setback is more, depending on if it's block length or distance, you can see how this would quickly become very cumbersome and confusing to everyone. So that is really
What's a
the
block? That we discussed that before.
Right, and especially, averaging on blocks tends to work better when we have a grid-like pattern, and so there are certain areas where that's true. But there are some streets that do not have an intersection for a little bit, especially in an existing neighborhood, or that street only divides it on one side of the street, which leaves the other side of the street a very long block. And practically, the other challenge is that visually, if you're taking it from a 300-foot radius, your experience is normally your view as you're going along the street. So with different types of housing communities back to back, when you're taking it as a radius, you could include properties that are in a whole different neighborhood that have a whole different side setback. For instance, Glenmere is pretty close to Eagle Park, and I would say that the setbacks in those two neighborhoods couldn't be more different. But when you're doing it as a radius, you may capture some of both. And so really, even though you're doing a radius with that intent, it's not practically materializing in the same way. And the other thing to remember...
To that point, are there not limitations on the calculation to eliminate, like, other neighboring subdivisions?
There are not. No, you can eliminate an outlier subject to planning director discretion. So let's say every lot has one thing, and one lot skewing the data, right? Typically, as a matter of practice, we'll throw out that lot because it's skewing the data and it's not practical to include it in the calculation. However, there is not a provision that allows for throwing out the entirety of a neighborhood just because it's not within the existing neighborhood. And actually, the way it's currently written, it says the setback of all principal structures. It doesn't delineate that those are detached home structures. So that is one of the, there's lots of practical challenges with the implementation as it's written today, which is one of the reasons we're seeking some clarification on this item. And we understand the intent too, right? That as you're going down a street, you want to have some level of visual consistency. And so that's why that front setback is said to establish a certain minimum, because that's established for safety and practicality reasons, right? To make sure that if you're set back far enough, if we require a front yard tree, if you're not set back far enough, you're probably not going to be able to practically install that front yard tree. If you're not set back far enough, you might not be able to have a driveway that's deep enough, right, to be able to put your car in there. And there's some other utility implications of making sure that we can have connection. We also allow for a front porch sometimes within that setback, so if you're not deep enough and then you put a front porch within the setback, it can create some practical application challenges. So that's why we're looking to establish a minimum. Right now, there are portions in the community where if we utilize the average front setback, that the homes that were built long ago, especially if a new street was then added in, some of them may have a 5 to 10 foot front setback. So if somebody comes in to build, they could build consistently with that frontage, but if it's a new development, staff felt it was important to still establish a bare minimum front setback for new development in order to be as consistent as possible, because sometimes neighborhoods change over time as new development happens, and the only way to get things to develop to a standard that we all want to strive to is to do that incrementally over time. So the real goal is clarification, and we tried to look at this a few different ways, but ultimately, planning board is recommending it as presented to you this evening, and we'd be open for discussion or consideration of any of these items in more detail.
Any other questions?
I do another one, sorry. So we kind of discussed too, in regards to the front setbacks, and maybe this is something that'll come at a later time, but trying to reserve in key areas, and I think we had said that we wanted kind of like a transportation study and to identify what the key corridors were to help us reserve the right-of-way for, or an additional right-of-way for roads or any type of infrastructure or sewer. Is that something that we're waiting on until we have that transportation study? or-
So staff has been reviewing that, and that is something
Yeah.
that we intend to provide an update to you all in January,
Okay.
based on the proposed schedule.
That's a good point, Ralph.
And then, again, kind of, and I just want to make sure I get this right, because again, the overall intent, of course, is the safety. You know, I remember it was a couple years ago when they came out with that article about how houses are being built too close to each other, and if one catches fire, it can kind of cause a chain reaction. But another one too is, you know, kind of honoring the heritage in the area within itself, because if you have a property, I understand you want to develop it, but also you have a house and you live there for X amount of years, you want it to be compatible to that area. So I just want to make sure I just absolutely can understand this infill piece,
Sure.
because when I read through it and we get the presentation, I just want to understand that we're not immediately putting in a minimum that it would be less or could potentially harm the existing neighborhoods, I guess.
So I think that that's ultimately going to be a matter of your discretion.
Right.
In terms of what it does protect is a minimum side setback from each of those lots, as opposed to the option that would potentially allow for that side setback to be fully applied to the left and or right side as it is today. One practical matter is that sometimes in those older neighborhoods, some have garages, some don't have garages. What that means is sometimes that house footprint is shifted to allow for that driveway to extend to the side or into the side yard of the house to allow for a deeper driveway. And so that means sometimes if you make the side setbacks so restricted, you actually don't allow anybody to have any area to shift the building form as needed to accommodate that. Some homes on larger lots prefer to have a garage that's accessed in the rear yard. And so it allows for the driveway to be able to loop or curve in order to do that. So what you're seeing outlined isn't the necessarily that everybody's gonna build to that, right? I mean, it is possible, but there's also some needed flexibility within that in order to design in a way that's compatible with the neighborhood. So we are trying to kind of thread that needle and looking for some feedback to see if, as it's proposed, it meets the intent of doing that, but in a way that also provides for additional transparency for our community to understand what our codes actually say and how to utilize them.
Right.
I don't disagree with any of what you're saying tonight. I can see the rationale, the practicality behind a lot of it. I guess my question for my colleagues would be, how do you guys feel about, I'm okay with the type C side setbacks, but the type B at 14, I know we just moved it from 12, right, recently?
We moved it to 12.
It's currently 12 as a minimum. We're moving it as proposed to 14
Was it 212, how long ago?
in 2020.
But it would have to be 7 and 7 on each side, right?
That's correct. So right
Unless you
now,
wanted a special use.
Unless you,
Yes.
or conditional, right?
right now you can shift it a little bit, as long as it's those with, and practically, the best, most recent example that we've utilized in some of the discussions here is Central Park South, right? They're consistent on how they're applying that, so there's still the same minimum building separation, but I believe it's that they have close to a 0 left side setback, but they have all of their setback on the right side
Are those
for
type
all
B
of
or
those
C?
lots.
Are those type B or C?
They are. Keep in mind, type C was a newly created type that was intended to just be for new conventional or large lot subdivisions, right? To try to incentivize them. That was why type C was initially created to begin with. Up until 2023, I believe is when that text memo went through, we only had type A and type B. We only had alley loaded and street loaded. So having 3 different types for detached homes is a relatively new development. And so what we're trying to do is balance that out, because we know what the intent was in 2023, but practically once it's been in place, we've had some challenges in terms of, like, there are some lots on Nixon. They said, well, you know, we're over half an acre and we're over 80 foot in width. So which set of rules applies to us? Because we're infill, but we're also now defined as maybe a type C lot. So which set of rules applies? And so what we're trying to do is clarify that and say, look, regardless of whether or not you're deemed a conventional or larger lot or whatever, if your lot width is over 80, whether you're in an existing development or we are in a brand new one that is incentivizing larger lot developments overall, here's your setbacks and here's your requirements.
What are the setbacks at Central Park South, do you recall?
I do not recall 100%, but they would have been the ones that were in place in, I believe, 2019, so they would have been, they were probably an 11 foot, so alley got increased to 10, but before that, it was 11 foot as the minimum for the type B lots. So it could have been 5.5 on either side, or in their case, they went through a former approval process called Major Development Plan, where they presented a plan that redistributed those side setbacks. So
But they're basically in the 11 range, is that what you're?
they may be more, but the 11 would have been their minimum.
Okay.
So, and that's the other thing to keep in mind, is that these are the minimums. It's not to say that every development is going to only build to the minimum, because there are some sites that have topography that restrict that. They also may buy a house model or plan that doesn't utilize that entire area, right? And they may choose to site it on the site however they'd like. So it's a little bit challenging to thread the needle to find a one-size-fits-all, but we felt it was important to provide clarity and transparency about what our expectations are so that we could uniformly apply them and make sure that we're answering questions directly when people call. We're getting more and more calls and requests for zoning verification letters for infill development, as most of the larger pieces of land in Belmont are becoming either purchased or having development applications on them. So what this means is likely as a community, we're going to see more and more transition to infill development or redevelopment. And so it's important for us to clarify our requirements.
Any other questions?
How do you guys feel with the 14-foot overall side setback on the type Bs?
Parks, should we be doing, is this
Just
appropriate for public hearing, or is this more for
That's more debate.
debate?
sorry.
Yeah.
But you
So-
you need to make sure
Right,
everybody's asked her
Yes.
questions.
How did you guys handle these numbers? Just like as an example, like 7 on each side. How did,
Sure. So the good planning rule of thumb is that you would change your codes incrementally. So we changed them back in 2020 from 5.5 foot on each side to 6. We understand that there's interest in increasing them more, but there is always some unintended consequences that we want to be mindful of for doing anything too fast. And so what we're proposing is another incremental increase to see if that's a spot that feels more comfortable within our community, knowing that we will also intend to update the land development code following the update to the comp plan, and we can revisit it at that time if we need to make further incremental adjustments.
well, we do have one, if there's no further questions for Tiffany at this time, we do have one individual signed up for public comment, and so we could always recall Tiffany before we close the public hearing if you all think of anything else in the meantime. But for now, thank you, Tiffany. And we have one individual signed up for public comment, and that is Nicholas Vesely. So our standard, well, you're well aware, our standard 3-minute rule will apply. Yes.
Nick Vesely at 106 Stowe Road. I also currently serve as the chairman of the planning board. This one got me particularly up in arms because it seems like there's a general trend in the city that we're we're all of the mindset that we need to stick to exactly where we're at in today's day and age, and there's no room for changing the city at all moving forward. And this one in particular, I've completely thrown out everything I was gonna say because of the discussion that was just had. But generally speaking, I feel like if you want your houses to all look the same and be generally conforming with your neighbor, and quite frankly, if you care what your neighbor's doing at all, go live in an HOA or move to somewhere else where they have stricter zoning laws. But where I come from, if you own land, that's your land, you should be able to do whatever you want with it, generally speaking, within reason. And it seems like there's a trend here to want to move things more towards caring about what your neighbor's doing and imposing rules on your property that are affected by what your neighbor has or is concerned about. And generally speaking, I have a problem with that. Now, I know at least 4 of you were elected as Republicans with the endorsement of the Republican Party. That generally means that you believe in smaller government or limited government authority. And yet, in 2020, I think I was also against moving it to 6 feet because it's, again, moving it in the wrong direction. By moving the setbacks larger, you're now creating all of the houses in the neighborhood to be exactly the same. Because you're incentivizing people like me who live in Amity Acres. I have a 110-foot wide lot. I can easily take my lot, knock down my house, split it in 2, and now I have 2 55-foot lots. Because you're basically telling me that my 110-foot lot has to have a 24-foot setback. So my ranch house, which fits very nicely on that lot, might not be the best way for me to expand my house in the future or redevelop it in the future. So I'm gonna take another lot like that in the city, split it in half, go 2 55-foot lots with smaller setbacks. Because now I can get more on my property than what you're imposing on larger lots. So I was the one vote in dissent on this particular issue because I feel like we're generally moving in the wrong direction. So I have more time, but I'll leave it at that, basically, is that I think all of these discussions are what is my concern about with my neighbor, and I think that's just completely the wrong attitude we need to have as a city. You're so concerned about these built-up neighborhoods and these big, large, major development plans and big subdivisions, and you're completely missing the mark on all these infill properties and what we can and can't do on smaller properties because we're pushing things in the wrong direction. We're increasing setbacks, we're increasing rules, we care about what our neighbor's doing, and it's just completely the wrong way to go. So, appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, has anyone further questions for Tiffany or anything, or are we prepared to close the public hearing and begin debate?
I'll make a motion to close the public.
All right, Jason made a motion to come out of public hearing, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are out of public hearing. That brings us to item C5. Consider approval of an ordinance for TA 2024-01, front and side setbacks, single-family residential. Now, for us to have debate, do we need some sort of motion, Parks, or can we just debate? Okay, let's just...
Unless somebody has to make a motion and second and then have discussion.
Well, I think it's fine if we can just debate, to go back to Jason's question, because I'm not sure what the motion might ultimately look like. So, all right, here we are. I guess let's go back to Jason's question.
Yeah, I don't have as much of a problem with the type C lots. I don't necessarily have a problem even with the type B lots, but I'm just curious about you all's take on the side setback measurement, the 14-foot overall. And I thought Tiffany made a great point about, in the way this is kind of proceeded in the past, is doing it incrementally versus large, changes. But how do you guys feel about the side setbacks on the type B? Because that's more common, that is more common than the type Cs.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask you, like, what's holding you up there, just to try to get an idea of what you're thinking.
I mean, to me, it's a move in the right direction. And again, it's, we're constantly hearing from folks about being on top of their numbers and, virtually being able to have a cup of coffee through the window. But this is, again, I think this is a move in the right direction. And I think it's kind of the right step from 12 to 14. It's not a drastic, I guess some people might view it as a drastic change, but I'm just curious about
mean, I'm okay with it. I mean, I think it is a move in the right direction. I mean, I understand both sides of the argument, but, you know, when we talk to the residents, when we hear kind of the concerns, this is one that pops up quite a bit. At least people bring it up to me. I mean, again, that's kind of the reason why I was bringing it up. And that was the reason why it was brought up a couple of years ago. So again, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think overall, adding the simplicity for staff would probably be very beneficial, because I think it's been, at least since I've been on council, at least 5 or 6 that have come before us, and Jim even more than me, where it's like, well, you know, there's a very gray area here on how we calculate this side setback. I think, you know, it's hard to get it completely 100% right. I think staff's done a really good job of trying to, you know, carry out what the current text states. But I think that's a positive or a benefit to it for the simplicity reasons. Again, I think there is the happy medium where you don't go over too much and you don't go under. So I'm pleased with what's presented just from my perspective.
I like the clarity that's being provided. I think it's good to just have the sort of the, you know, 6 feet, or, you know, 7, 14, or whatever, as opposed to a percentage, because I know they went through that. I like the clarity with respect to the infill. I feel like the 300, and I know, you know, what you're saying, Alex, but I've seen more even than you of these 300 feet, or, you know, 1 block length that just causes no end of trouble for us, for special use permits, especially in some of these older neighborhoods that have, I know Tiffany said, well, one, you know, they'll throw out one that skews it, but we've seen even, you know, a couple months ago, you have 2 or 3 very large lots that sort of skew the averages and cause people to have to come to get a special use permit. So I really like that clarity. I do also like the tying it to the fire code so that we don't end up sort of lagging and then have to, you know, if we incorporate the fire code for the the distance between the houses, then every time the fire code is updated and changes, we go along with it, as opposed to, you know, if we're not paying super sharp attention, now all of a sudden we're lagging and we have to, you know, affirmatively change it. So that's always in drafting, that's always a good idea. That way you don't have to amend the code every single time it changes. So, you know, I don't feel as strongly, I think, about distance between houses as perhaps some of my colleagues. And it's probably, I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood where the houses are pretty close together, and I turned out all right. And the town where I grew up is... Yes.
But you did move down here, didn't you?
I did. But, you know, this might surprise you, the town where I grew up, when those houses are so close together, it's still standing. And, you know, going...
That's what's great about Belmont. We have a little bit of both worlds. You have to shake your neighbor's hand and then see them a mile later.
But I mean, I understand the sentiment, and certainly I won't deny that I've heard the sentiment, and I understand where it's coming from, and incrementalism is good, and so I'm not averse to, I'm not as enthusiastic about it, but I'm also not averse to it if, you know, that's the recommendation of staff, which it is. You know, I don't have a problem with incrementally. You know, I think I probably would have a problem if we went, you know, way up here.
Yeah.
But I think going from, you know, 12 to 14, you know, I'm fine with that. And I think there's good justification, and I also think there's good efficiencies in the other changes that these amendments represent.
I agree with all of you. Tiffany, this was foreign for me. Obviously, I didn't understand any of it, but your presentation, you know, of course, I had asked some of my colleagues on this, but your presentation dumbed it down a bit, and I appreciate it, and
to agree, but it made it more clear for us to understand for people that want to build homes, et cetera. So I think I have no problem with it, and I think it was, I think the difference is perfect, especially with fire codes. I think that makes sense to just kind of go with that versus us having to change that up. So I have no problem with it.
I do have a question maybe for Chief. How often do those fire codes change? I don't know, I mean, for example, in the past 4 years, have they changed as it pertains to this?
It depends on the politics at the top. And those are about to change. I know there were several bills that was affecting the fire service that were going to be extremely costly. We're just waiting to hear from the client.
Okay.
But to answer your question,
Okay, gotcha, I was just curious.
You need to give a lawyer answer, it depends. So am I getting the sense that we're all fine with what has been proposed?
Yeah.
It was the option, Tiffany, you talked about it when you were presenting, bringing it up. When was it? That we could revisit this? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, so staff is proposing that we revisit and update the full land development code after we update the comprehensive land use plan to make sure that both documents are consistent with one another.
And I think that's a good idea, because we talked, I think, Jason, you were involved in the, one of the steering committees, and Centralina basically did the study and said, well, your comp plan says this, and your land development code says something quite different. Because we never, when we updated the comp plan last time, we never really did a comprehensive update of the land development code. So, you know, what I was saying, you know, it's lagging. So I think that's a good idea. But nothing else hearing, thank you. I guess it would be appropriate to entertain a motion to approve the text amendment as presented here.
I'll make a motion for text amendment as presented.
Second.
All right, motion made by Jason, seconded by Alex. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, it passes. We also need a all right, very good.
I will make the motion that the proposed text amendment is reasonable and in the best interest of the public, as it increases transparency of land use regulations. And the proposed text amendment is consistent with comprehensive land use plan goal number 1. Land use as it helps to ensure a balanced approach to land use, and the proposed text amendment is consistent with comprehensive land use plan goal number 4, and the character as it helps to protect and enhance the character of Belmont and its community appearance.
Thank you. You're doing your homework. Do I have a second? All right, motion made by Alex, seconded by Catherine. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. All right. Good job, everyone. Thank you. That brings us to our last item, C6, public hearing for TA 2024-04, smoke, vape shops, and cannabis dispensaries. We are going to open the public hearing, and then we will, well, we'll see what happens after that. But I will...
Motion to open the public hearing.
Okay, motion made by Alex. Seconded by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, we are in public hearing. Tiffany, the floor is yours once again.
Thank you. So this text amendment was one of the text amendments that was requested by City Council for staff to explore and research. And so we did just that and ultimately presented this item to Planning Board at their November 2024 meeting. Planning Board, after some discussion and reviewing staff's proposed text amendment, elected to continue this item for further discussion at their next meeting, specifically with 2 goals in mind for that continuation. One, they are looking and seeking a better understanding of the specific concerns or lack thereof that might need to be accounted for when regulating the use. So we do have Chapter 6 that outlines for certain uses within our community some additional regulations. So the question becomes are there any needed for this use when creating regulations that might not have been considered in the text amendment as proposed? And the other one is that they would like to, they have requested some feedback specifically from the Main Street Advisory Board and other downtown businesses prior to rendering a recommendation to ensure that they understand the impacts of the proposed text amendment as it relates to our Main Street and downtown business community. So that item, it is being requested to be continued based on not having yet a planning board recommendation for your consideration this evening. Staff also wanted to make sure that we kept you all informed of some legislation at the state level that may also impact any consideration of this text amendment. So a couple days, maybe the very next day, following the planning board meeting, staff was made aware that effective November 20th, 2024, Senate Bill 382 was passed, which expanded the definition of downzoning as defined by the state for our land use regulations to include anything that creates a commercial or industrial nonconformity. So that had not, any creation of nonconformities hadn't originally been included in a definition of downzoning. And in addition to that, the state legislation noted that any item, so there's 3 bullets of what could constitute as downzoning, 2 of which existed and 1 of which was added, that all downzoning would now require written consent from all impacted property owners, which provides some practical challenges for identifying all impacted property owners for any case that might be considered downzoning. So staff is actively following the future of this bill. It was vetoed by Governor Cooper on November 26th, and effective about an hour before coming down for this meeting, I saw a news article noting that the Senate has officially overridden the governor's veto, and that now this will be presented to the House for its final approval to determine whether or not the veto issued by the governor will stand or whether or not it will be overturned. So at this time, staff is awaiting the outcome of this legislative change by the state in order to determine what impacts it may have on the proposed amendment and our ability to proceed with it as currently drafted. So that's where we stand today, and as I know more about the future of that bill at the state level, I will be sure to communicate that with Miles so that he can keep you all in the loop as well. But it is.
I would assume, following the Senate's decision, that we would know how the House voted before our January meeting when we'd be continuing this hearing to.
That's our understanding. We did attend a legislative call with the American Planning Association, the North Carolina chapter, and it's their understanding that all decisions would need to be made prior to mid-December when everybody adjourns. So that's everyone's understanding, although sometimes timelines move a little bit different than anticipated, but that's the current projection.
And then we'd have to do our analysis and be prepared to present it to us in January. Is that correct?
That it will, so it would go, that's correct. If it goes back to planning board based on this, which it is projected to go back.
Right, well, go back, I mean, it's still there.
Well, it is still there. The challenge is that our next planning board meeting is on December 11th, and so we may not know the outcome of this item prior to that, and so that does prove some practical challenges as this item would be continued from the previous one.
But they can only
They only
do
have
that.
40 days.
Yes. And if they don't issue a recommendation, then it comes to us with no recommendation. Is that my understanding?
That's correct. So it is possible that if a determination is not made by the House prior to their meeting, that we would perhaps need to discuss a follow-up or a special meeting with planning board in order to make sure that a recommendation can be considered for this item.
Well, but the planning board didn't originally, they had their own concerns separate and apart from this legislation.
That is correct.
So conceivably, they could still proceed regarding what they were concerned about and leave the legal ramifications of the bill to the city attorney and
They could, yes, they could elect to render a recommendation and then do so contingent on any future legal updates to city council.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so currently, are there any restrictions on any of our business and commercial zones where smoke and vape shops cannot be located?
As a practical matter, this specific use type is not defined within the Land Development Code, which is why we're looking to introduce it. There is a definition for retail, if it's open to the general public, although it's our understanding that not every store may be based on the product sales within it, although some stores may be and just happen to sell certain products that are limited by age in terms of who can actually do the purchasing. So it's a little bit unclear as it's currently written, which is why we're seeking to add some definitions and provide some clarity within the code.
And can you define for me and perhaps others, in simple terms, downzoning?
Sure, downzoning is any time that you further restrict what's allowed within a certain zone, whether that be the allowable uses, the allowable density, and in this case, creating or restricting uses in a way that creates a nonconformity with existing businesses or uses that exist today.
And what the Senate bill is proposing is that local governments would be prohibited from doing that without getting the permission of
100% of the property owners.
100%.
Well,
Wasn't
you
there
know, we
some
had some, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, wasn't there some question about the applicability of this even to our situation? Did I hear that this afternoon? Or do we know full well that?
I would leave that to Parks, but yeah. I would err on the side of caution and the advice of our city attorney.
So I guess though, we do need to understand though, because there are existing types of business uses that are not allowed on the Main Street corridor, such as I believe one was tattoo parlors, nightclubs and stuff like that. So if this bill is to pass, are those grandfathered in or?
So the question would be, do we have any that exist today? If we have any that exist today, even though the use is no longer there, if the text that we have in place today created a nonconformity, that's, from my understanding, not necessarily the issue. The issue is any new legislation that further creates nonconformities within the community. And the way this legislation is written, it actually is backdated 6 months. So for communities that have made some changes that are now considered to be downzoning by the updated definition, those ordinances that they had adopted the past 6 months would also be unable to be enforced or utilized. We've done some preliminary review and we do not believe that any of our ordinances fall within this window that would be subject to that reconsideration, although we do want to be mindful of this legislation moving forward with some of the proposed text amendments.
Okay. And then just another maybe comment or question, because I was talking to a planning and zoning board member. As it is today, and correct me if I'm wrong, as it is today, ABC stores can only be on Wilkinson Boulevard, is that correct?
That's correct.
You know, while we're looking at this, because I know the ABC store, the board is looking for a new location, we might want to update that as well. Because I guess if it's restricted to just the Wilkinson Boulevard, an area near, let's say, Harris Teeter, or a new commercial area out in McLean, they wouldn't be able to expand out there, is that correct?
That's correct. Based on the timeline as presented and approved by City Council for this text amendment, staff has not had enough time to look at other areas to expand the ABC stores. Although if it's Council's interest in incorporating that into this text amendment, we would respectfully ask for some additional time for both planning board to review in order to allow staff some additional time to review that topic in conjunction with this one.
Then maybe we keep it separate, would be my suggestion.
That is.
But we should probably
Yes.
look at that as well, as a second stream.
But, well, I think what we were hearing from public comment about, I thought Republicans were the party of like small, and local control, so this is a frustrating development perhaps, but it sounds as though, one, we have nothing from the planning board, and two, we've got this legislation that we need to figure out what's going on with. So if there are no further questions, I would entertain a motion to continue this public hearing until our January 6th, 2025 meeting. Is that the correct date?
That is the next date.
Yeah, okay.
Motion to continue the public hearing until January 6th.
Motion by Alex, seconded by Jason. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, the public hearing on this is continued until January. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that is the end of the regular agenda. That leaves us with only other business. And so let's start with Alex.
Thanks, Jim. First, I'll be brief. First of all, thank you to the Public Works, Police, Fire, everyone, Main Street program for the tree lighting tonight. That was a really nice ceremony. You know, these crowds get bigger and bigger, I feel like. I'd be curious to know how many folks were there if we had like a rough count.
Cassie says give her 3 business days.
3 business days, okay. But I think that was a really good job, you know, to Public Works. The lights look great, if anyone's in here, in downtown on Main Street. The trees look great. Looking forward to the parade tomorrow, outside of that, Jim.
Okay. All right, thanks. Charlie?
Yeah, echoing what Alex said, the tree lighting was awesome. I love the fact that we have vendors out there for the kids. And it's a real great family fun. And like Alex also said, it's getting bigger and bigger every year, so that's really awesome to see. And I know that having Mayor Turner's family do the tree lighting was an amazing touch. I thought that went really well. And I encourage everybody to come to the parade tomorrow. What time is that start? 3? 3. That's about all I've got.
Okay, thanks. Catherine?
Again, I don't want to drag it on, but everything that Alex and Charlie said. And then I also wanted to remind everybody that the police has shared all the road closures and routes that you can take and cannot take during tomorrow's parade. So just be mindful of that. It is on Facebook. Miles, is it on our city page or is it on the police? It is? Okay.
Yeah, it's already.
Okay, cool. So you can see it on there as well. And then thank you to Miles and staff for having Richard's family light the tree. I thought that was amazing, and I know that was very special to them, something they'll never forget. So I appreciate that. That's all I got.
Thank you. Jason?
I would like to echo my colleagues' sentiments about the activities, not just tonight and tomorrow, but really the next few days and weeks ahead. We've got a lot of more activities I think we've ever had for Christmas. So, like you guys said, larger crowds. I know our police, fire, and public works staff, and DVDA, and everybody involved in these activities is going to do a bang-up job. So, thank you guys in advance. One thing I know Miles and I have talked about, and talked with a few of you guys about too, is the Belmont Sports Hall of Fame, which currently has their memorabilia located in the Belmont Historical Society building on Catawba Street. And I sit on that board, and we outgrew our space there a number of years ago, and we've been looking for a new home that might better accommodate and actually be more appropriate for the Hall of Fame memorabilia. And what we're talking about now is moving that. Basically the trophy cases and all of the framed pictures of all the inductees over the last 35 years to the second floor of the rec center. And apparently I believe that's going to be a space that would be a lot more compatible than where we are now. So I would just like to direct staff further to help us look into that and move that forward.
Does that, just out of curiosity, would that mean that the city takes ownership of, or would it be like an on-loan thing? I think that's something that we would just might need to figure out.
Your staff can come back to us.
But it's not unheard of. I mean,
No, I was just curious.
Where I grew up, the Recreation Department sponsored the Sports Hall of Fame, so it was basically the plaques and everything were in the Civic Center.
Right. Okay. Sorry, I was just curious.
No, that's a good one.
Is that going in a room upstairs, or is that just like?
It's like if you go up the stairs and you turn back to your right, there's a large wall there. A lot of it could be housed, most all of it could be housed right there.
Right, then they have this play case on the first floor, as you go upstairs on the left-hand side on there. Please do it, there's not too much in the display case that I'm aware of right now, but.
We can change that.
Yeah. My last thing is I'll once again concede bragging rights to our city manager for yet another year. His Wolfpack carrying my Tar Heels apart over the weekend.
The end of Mac. Rides off in the sunset with a loss and a brawl.
Oh, man.
Well, I thank you, Jason. I don't want to talk about college. It's just
Let's talk about pro football.
Well, yeah, I'll talk about pro football, but no, well, Charlie and the Dukies got the best of Wake Forest there, thanks to some dreadful defense on the last play of the game. But really, the only thing I want to mention, and I know this was besides echoing everyone else in terms of the great job that everyone did in conjunction with the Christmas tree lighting ceremony tonight, is Miles mentioned this in our weekly update, but I've certainly heard from people, and I know you all have heard from people about the recycling pickup being delayed. I live in the Friday zone, I don't know, and we've seen it Saturdays, sometimes even Mondays. I know the last time we had a council meeting, I said, well, if it's still out there when I leave for the council meeting, I must have just missed it, and they actually came by, but obviously that's problematic, and so I know Miles has been looking into what can be done about this, and so if you could just give us an update, because I'm sure it's a public concern as well.
Right, so 2 weeks ago, I believe now, our public works staff met with Waste Pro to talk about not only recycling, but yard waste pickup and bulk item pickup and white goods pickup and trash pickup. One of the main subjects being around the recycling being delayed regularly on the Friday route. I think that's the one that has grown the most. So with new houses comes new rollout cans, and so a greater number of pickup area for the truck drivers, and a limited time in the day to pick all of it up and then take it to the recycling places. And so what Waste Pro has decided is that they would like to study a redistribution of the route, which means that probably Friday's route will be affected. More than likely, maybe all the routes will be affected. And so they're in that process, probably take until the spring to get to that point. They're also considering an A and a B route, which means that you would have recycled trucks every week in Belmont. Just depends on if you're on the A or the B route, which will allow them to pick up on a better basis and not leave cans out everywhere. They did state that they had a lot of folks that were new employees that were being trained up, so that was delayed over the past month and a half. And so that process will go through. We'll get Waste Pro's recommendation. We'll understand it, and they bring it to you all. More than likely as an informational item, because it needs to occur. And then we'll roll that out, make sure that we get the public notified through all of our means that we have out there, and plenty of time to implement that change. But I could probably see that coming within the next 6 months or so.
So are you seeing those delays just around holidays or more?
Oh, it's been like every recycling day, every 2 weeks.
They're like a day too late?
Yeah, first it was Saturday, all right, fine, that's weird, but whatever. And then, sometimes it even creeps into Monday, and that's,
Sometimes we miss all
You just don't know.
Yeah.
Or you just keep it out.
Yeah, and obviously keeping it out is not a good look to have.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. So our staff has done a good job communicating with Waste Pro when these items occurred. A few other things that were going on that Public Works is working with Waste Pro on. I believe that the cans, a lot of times we get requests for broken cans or new cans, and then there's a significant delay on Waste Pro getting the cans out to the customers. And so we've asked Waste Pro, can we house our cans here? Because we can respond quicker than just having Waste Pro put in a ticket. A customer put in a ticket to Waste Pro, then it takes months to get it out, 2 or more weeks to get it out, the new can out to the folks. And so we're considering, will we have a stash of cans and recycling?
Year 2 of waiting on a recycling can.
Year 2?
Yeah.
Sure, Chris, we'll get to you tomorrow. That's not good. Yeah, so,
we got dumpsters to throw them in the neighborhood.
I do just one question or follow up on that, not in the discussion, but isn't the renegotiation of this contract coming up relatively soon with Waste Pro?
I believe it's 2 years out. Yeah, not this coming year, but the next year after that.
Leave it be until then. I wouldn't want to.
No, I understand. I was just curious. I had thought that was that time term or that time was coming up soon.
Yeah. Because that would be fun.
Yeah.
Thank you for the update, Miles.
Yes, thank you.
There being nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Al, second by Charlie. All right.